Good afternoon. I am Vincent Kolb. I'm the pastor of Sixth Presbyterian Church, and on behalf of our Gun Safety Committee and the session of Sixth Presbyterian Church, I cannot say welcome to Heeding God's Call Memorial to the Lost. None of us want to be here, but we feel compelled to be here because human beings are not data. We are not statistics. In our faith tradition, human beings are made in the image of God, and we are all God's children. And we are told by a well-known rabbi here that we revere that God has even numbered the hairs of our heads, and that not even one sparrow falls to the ground without God knowing it. God's heart is broken. And the families of 100 people, the last 100 who have lost their lives to gun violence, are broken. And we are tired. We are tired of gathering in spaces and street corners to bear witness to the addiction of guns and gun violence that has ripped apart every community in this country. And so we hope and we pray that this memorial will contribute to the gathering throngs of voices that just say enough is enough. We didn't have this epidemic of gun violence half century ago. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly." And I'm personally convinced that the fear that fuels gun purchases and the anger that feeds gun violence is inescapably connected to the lack of social support that citizens have in this country. Living wages, paid sick leave, parental leave, access to affordable health care, and the like. The list goes on and on. We are very honored to have guests with us today. We are honored to have State Representative Dan Frankel, State Representative Summer Lee. I know State Senator Jay Costa is on the way. These individuals have been voices in the wilderness, in the halls of power, fighting against the tide for reasonable gun legislation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to say that they're a little busy right now. I know a lot of you in this congregation are phone banking and canvassing with me, and if we're busy doing that, these people are beyond busy doing that. So we're going to let them talk, and we're going to let them leave, all right? Because they've got things to do, places to be, and votes to garner. We are also honored to have other tireless workers for a safer society with us today. Please welcome Josh Fleetman from Ceasefire PA. Thank you, Josh. There have been a few times when our Gun Safety Committee, after Sandy Hook and all the time after that, have kind of said, let's just bag it. It's a lost cause. So thank you for helping us in this church continue to organize and fight. Thank you so much. We are also honored to have Marilyn Mulvihill with Heeding God's Call. And thanks to Heeding God's Call, I believe it's 12 churches in the county. How many is it? 10 churches in the county. And notice 10 churches in places in the county that would not have had this a few years ago. If you are a bit skeptical about this, the needle is moving. There are churches that have hosted this display in places. There was a time when the only place Moms Demand Action could gather on June 4th was on our front steps. We are so glad not to be hosting that. We would much rather it be all over in every community. So thank you, Marilyn. We are deeply honored to have Crystal Coates and Tina Ford with Moms Incorporated here. I think, Crystal, did you just walk in? Did I? No. Oh, there you are. Great. She was on her way from work, so thank you. With Moms Incorporated, thank you for being with us today. Crystal is going to speak. At Sixth Presbyterian Church, we say we are at home in an urban neighborhood of many faiths, and we acknowledge that we are not alone on the path to God. So I just want to say as a disclaimer, if you're not a part of the Christian tradition, you are welcome here. Forgive our preoccupation with Jesus, okay? Pay it no mind as you invoke your own God, your own spirituality, because so many spiritualities in the human condition speak of the need to recognize that we're siblings and we're neighbors and we're fellow pilgrims, and that violence has no place in the human community. We have letters to sign to legislators. If you haven't done that, if you've never walked into this space, find who represents you. If you feel so moved by what you hear and what you ponder today, and join us in sending more letters. Let's just keep being bulldogs about that. Listening to the testimony today and listening to the reading of the names is not going to be easy, but it's necessary. So just do what you need to take care of yourself, because what we're doing this afternoon is hard. And may the peace that passes all understanding just unfold you in this hour and in all that is to come. Finally, Senator and Reverend Ralph Warnock just said, a vote is a kind of prayer for the world that you want to live in. I hope you will pray with your feet and vote your values on November 8th. Whew. Marilyn, tell us the story of heeding God's call. Come up here.
Good afternoon, church. I'm blessed to be here for this really important event. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for hosting the memorial. Thank you for caring about preventing gun violence. And thank you for anything you can do to prevent the loss of more lives. I'm Marilyn Mulvihill, and I am the representative for Heeding God's Call here in Western Pennsylvania. We've recently added Heeding God's Call to Prevent Gun Violence to our title, because obviously God has many different calls on the lives of his people. And our memorial to the lost, you've seen it out there. I think I've been to all of the this is 8. Yeah, this is 8. This is the most dramatic presentation I've seen. It's so visible. I came through here the other day and I wasn't even thinking about it, and I was like, whoa, look at that. This is the best. Thank you for what you've done. And it's visible, it's educational. It's a tool that educates the people about the toll of gun violence. When you see those shirts, when you see those names, it gets you. Oftentimes we think about gun violence as, that happens somewhere else. It's not real. Doesn't affect me personally, so why do I care? This makes it real, and we're so happy to have it. We're going to be at one more church, and then we're going to be on the grounds of the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary for the Episcopal Diocese Convention in November. And then we're going to retire it for the winter and hopefully bring it back out in next spring to come to more churches in the Pittsburgh area. Heeding God's Call to Prevent Gun Violence is headquartered in Philadelphia and really has had the most impact out there in eastern Pennsylvania. This tour, I'll call it, here in Allegheny County is the first time it's been to western Pennsylvania, but we truly believe it's not going to be the last. We hope that every faith institution would host the memorial, and our real hope, our real prayer, is that a groundswell of support would rise up and heed God's call to prevent gun violence here in Pennsylvania and across our great nation. This organization began when they used public opinion to close down a notorious licensed gun dealer in Philadelphia. And since that time, The memorial, the T-shirt memorial, has gone around to many, many churches, as I said, mainly in eastern Pennsylvania. It attracts media attention, and it honors the victims of gun violence and their families. But the most important thing I have to say today is that we really believe that the faith community, all faiths, are called to take a more visible stand, to speak more loudly, to heed God's call, to end the pandemic of gun violence in this country. And you know, folks, this is not a one-and-done deal. Too often, God's people come to an event like this, and they're thoroughly moved. And they go home, and they don't even think about gun violence, let alone do anything about it, until the next newsworthy mass shooting happens. We've got to stop that. We believe God is calling every one of you, each one of you, to do more. What would happen if each of you present, and what a wonderful turnout, if each of you present today would contact your government representatives, not once, but periodically? Put them on speed dial. I have it on speed dial on my phone. I do. And talk to them about passing common sense gun laws. Things like banning assault weapons, universal background checks, and red flag laws to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous individuals. This is not rocket science. We can do something. Those things will reduce gun violence. Tell your elected officials that's what you want them to do. And what would happen if each one of you today, here present, went home tonight and talked to your family, talked to your friends, not just once, but every now and again, about how to prevent gun violence? My family is like, stop, we've heard it. But we all should do that. We should all be advocates. And what would happen if each one of you who are present today only voted for gun sense candidates? You can look it up. Google gun sense candidates, and you'll see Summer Lee, and you'll see Dan Frankel, and you'll see, I'm not going to say the rest, you'll see Mr. Costa. You'll see a lot of those. And you can look to see what measures do they support. And if you would tell your friends and family, these are the people that we need support, we think a groundswell would just rise up. Think about this. Think about this. We know that in the history of social change throughout the world, the faith community is prominent in virtually all those movements: the abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, civil rights. All of these movements had a priesthood of believers in the vanguard. We believe that can happen again. At the murder of Trayvon Martin, President Barack Obama made the following statement: we should ask ourselves if we're doing all we can to stem the tide of gun violence that claims too many lives across the country on a daily basis. We should ask ourselves as individuals and as a society, and I'll add, as a church, how can we prevent future tragedies? I ask each of you today, if you're doing all you can to stem the tide of gun violence, to prevent future tragedies. My prayer is that each one of us in here will be able to answer that question. Yes, I'm doing all we can. Thank you.
Now, please listen for the word of God as we read from the Gospel of Matthew. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The word of the Lord.
Dan, can you come speak to us for a few minutes?
Thank you, Reverend Cole. And thank you so much, and so grateful to be here at Sixth Presbyterian, because I recall only 4 years ago being here with our community on the evening after the tragedy that took place in our community, in our city, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in the United States of America, in which 11 of our neighbors and our friends were murdered. This church has been a beacon of social justice. This corner of Squirrel Hill is a place that we all can find refuge and be advocates for social justice. So we are so grateful to have Sixth Presbyterian as part of our community. As I said a few days ago, I gathered with our diverse faith communities and others to honor those murdered not far from here as they gathered for synagogue 4 years ago. It was a beautiful, thoughtful show of solidarity, and I think the families of everyone affected felt the arms of Pittsburgh and the world wrapped around them. It was a really good thing, and I'm glad I was able to be part of it. Then on Friday, 6 people were shot in Pittsburgh as they left a funeral service for a young man who was himself shot in a triple homicide on October 18th. Gun violence takes many forms. We have gang violence and hate crimes and partner violence, and we have little children who find unsecured weapons and accidentally shoot themselves or others. We have suicides. We have mass shootings. We have people who survive gun violence but whose bodies and minds bear the scars forever. All gun violence is destructive and sad, and every single person who has been affected by it deserves to have the world wrap its arms around them in solidarity. But that's not even what most survivors or family members are even asking for. Over the years, I've talked to maybe hundreds of people in this position. What they want, regardless of how gun violence changed the trajectory of their lives, is for nobody to ever have to endure the suffering that gun violence brought into their world. Because what could be worse, as the parent who lost a child to gun violence, than looking at the news and seeing a parent in the first hours of their own loss and knowing what kind of unbearable journey they have ahead of them. So in Harrisburg, I, Senator Costa, Representative Lee, are fighting for them. We have introduced bills. We have meetings. I have press conferences, as do they. We write opinion pieces, all in an effort to put some reasonable restriction on the most dangerous and least regulated product in our marketplace. With slightly more success, we fight efforts to actually strip away the meager firearm restrictions we have. The fight has yielded few big victories over the years, although there have been some. Often it's a Sisyphean slog up the mountain again and again. But I stay with it, my colleagues stay with it, because the people who are affected by gun violence don't have a choice in the matter. They can't throw in the towel and find an issue that's easier, because they don't want anyone else to suffer the way that they have suffered. And we stay with it because you stay with it, because we care about human life and we want to protect it. So thank you. Thank you for being here and allowing me to be here with you. We can reduce gun violence, and we will. Thank you.
Summer.
Thank you, Pastor Kolb, and for everyone here. If you're gathered here, I know that you are someone who has offered relentless compassion and empathy and advocacy around this topic. I apologize in advance for not having the most eloquent words right now, because gun violence is something that's incredibly personal to me and to all of us, and politics is. And I was thinking about how do you deliver a speech about gun violence and not make it political, even as you are a politician, and I haven't come up with a way, so I'm just gonna do what I have to do. I want to offer thoughts and prayers. You know, I pray that the thoughts and the actions of each and every one of us, but particularly those who have the power to take action, would be in alignment. And I offer this thought that, and maybe this bit of comfort, that it absolutely can be. When we talk about gun violence, recognizing and realizing the many ways in which it manifests itself in this pretty unique society is a power that we have right now that we cannot afford to leave on the table. We've seen gun violence, and my colleague mentioned so many of the forms. Some of us in this room have seen almost every type of gun violence. I've seen victims as young as 8, as old as 80. When I first started my campaign, one of my oldest friends lost her 8-year-old child and her partner to gun violence. We've seen gun violence by suicide, gun violence by mass shooting, gun violence by poverty, by deprivation, by lack of resources, gun violence by hopelessness, gun violence by desperation. Gun violence is a political choice. It's a political choice every single day. And it's not just our politicians who make that choice, but it is every single one of us who has a right and a power to vote. So I want to ask you all today to make sure that our thoughts and our actions are in alignment. Because in the next week, and not just in this next week, but maybe it might not be next Tuesday, but maybe in the next election cycle, next May or the next November or the next presidential race, we will each have a choice about whether or not we will do something about gun violence here in our community and our nation. Writing letters to our politicians is one way, but I urge you to take it a step further. Go and write a text message to your family members, to your neighbors, to your friends. Right now, they are being inundated with political propaganda that is trying to distract them from what is possible in our society, and we have an obligation right now to go and liberate them from that. Because right now, there are people in our country who would have us believe that those folks, those of us who are fighting for common sense gun legislation are actually the extremists. That those of us who mourn gun violence in our communities are actually the ones who cared less about it. There are people who would use the communities like mine and our struggles and our vulnerabilities and our lack of resources and their hopelessness. They would use that for political gain and for fundraising opportunities. And we can't afford to be fooled by that. We cannot afford to be fooled by that. So I'd ask you that your actions in this election and every election and every cycle in between that, through your organizing, your advocacy, through your prayers, through your education, through your conversations at home with your family members, that we take steps every single day to get our country closer to what it should be and how it should be. And that means remembering that gun violence is an education issue. That we can stop gun violence by funding our schools. We can stop gun violence by investing in good jobs and unions and protecting them. We can impact gun violence through making sure that communities have the resources that they need, that we have wraparound services and after school programs, that we have gyms and basketball courts available to our young people. We can invest in their well-being. We can invest in our public libraries. We can invest in mental health services and healthcare and environmental justice. We can invest in those. Those are gun violence issues too. So when you go and you vote next Tuesday or next year, make sure that we are voting holistically. Be a single issue voter, but remember how every single one of these are interconnected. So I'm gonna ask you in these days and these weeks and these years, who can you talk to? Who can we bring in? Because we're not powerless. We are not powerless, and we cannot afford for anyone here to feel powerless. The actions that you're taking here, the compassion you're showing is power, but so too is your advocacy. It's power. So too is your vote. It's power. So I hope that you will go forth and you leave here today remembering that even as we know that another t-shirt is probably being created right now, that we cannot give in to that sort of hopelessness. We cannot give in to the growing tide of white nationalism that leads to anti-blackness and anti-Semitism, the two hands, it's two hands, that when you see one, the other is nearby, that we have to fight back against that. Where we see corruption in government, we have to fight back against that. So I hope that you will join us in that fight, that you will not be led astray by folks who care less about gun violence, because if they did, then they would join me and my colleagues in so many of the opportunities that we have to eradicate it. But I thank you more than anything. I thank you so much for the work that you in this community has done and continues to do. It is a beacon of hope in our region and our nation. And if we can create more beacons, then I know that we will get ourselves on the right track. So thank you.
Jay's here. Jay, come on. And Dan, I already told you to leave. Why are you here? Summer, Abigail, get on. You got work to do. Jay, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, Reverend, and the Sixth Presbyterian Church for remembering the 110 individuals who lost their lives just in the past year. And I really want to stand here and say thank you to my colleagues for standing shoulder to shoulder with us in the Senate, with us in the House, members who stand and have been fighting for common sense, reasonable, responsible gun reform measures, gun safety measures. And it's frustrating and it's very difficult. And there are certainly a variety of reasons why we are here today, as Representative Lee talked about, the need to take a holistic approach. More recently, with respect to mental health issues, that we worked this past budget season in Harrisburg to try to address some of those things with our young kids in the schools and our community mental health programs, to try to address some of the things, but also finding resources to prevent gun violence and making sure they reach the community, the individuals in the community who have the opportunity to reach out to folks. We've certainly been very supportive of that. But I got to tell you, as Representative Lee talked about, I'm going to put a political hat on right now, because I have to tell you, the measures that we're talking about trying to get through Harrisburg, every single one of our Democrats in the Senate and in the House have supported. Every single Republican voted against every single measure in the Senate, every single one, whether it was going to be the extreme risk protection order, whether it was lost and stolen, whether it was gun magazines, whether it was the assault weapon ban, you name it, they've stopped us, they prevented it, to the point where they would not even put a vote up for it. They would table the motion. They wouldn't even allow us to discuss, have the conversation. But I have to tell you, 4 years ago, they were standing here with us in sorrow, and they do it no matter where the incident is or whatever happens around the country, they'll express their sorrow. But they won't do anything. And I'm beyond frustrated. We've done discharge petitions where we tried to dislodge legislation from committee, to, again, just to have it considered. And it's wrong. And every day that goes by, we hear more and more of individuals, young people in particular, who've lost their lives. And we hear more and more about shootings that Dan talked about earlier. I just came from Arlington. One of my employees there, we were at the Halloween event. And it's an open trunk, and the kids come by and get candy. She didn't open her trunk because in her trunk has a bullet hole through the back of the trunk. That's something in a neighborhood that took place on last Friday. Those are the type of things. My colleague, Senator Shree Street, had his office shot up in Center City, Philadelphia. These are things where innocent people are going to be subjected to because we're not getting our arms around what needs to be done. So I'm going to plead to all of you and say, while you are represented by people in the city of Pittsburgh, for the most part in Allegheny County, and in Philadelphia and Southeast PA and the surrounding counties, that are very supportive of these measures, it's our folks and outside those areas that I'm going to ask all of you to reach to and reach out to. Particularly those folks in the faith community, say, listen, I need you to contact your legislator, your state senator, and tell them to support some of the measures that will impact the lives of people as we go forward on this legislation. And maybe we have to make those choices, was mentioned earlier, probably one of the previous speakers, that we have to look on the ballot, whether it's next Tuesday, whether it's next year or the following year, find out who's taking and willing to stand up and say, I will support these measures going forward. Not only the gun reform measures, certainly, but all the more holistic approach to this. Who's going to make sure we invest in education? Who's going to make sure that we're going to do things that relate to community violence programs? Who's going to make sure that we have community mental health programs and mental health programs in our schools? Those are the people who we need to exercise our support for and be able to vote along those lines, because we've had these meetings, we have these gatherings here and in Harrisburg frequently, and we're just not penetrating the folks that we need to get to. So I'm very thankful to be here. I'm sorry that we have to continue to have these meetings, but I think at the end of the day, your support, your collective efforts to remember those souls today, and that's what we're here to do today. Remember those folks we've lost. And the symbolic gesture out front is very impactful. When I drove up, I just saw it today. I didn't see it over the weekend or so. It's moving. And when you look at the names of all these individuals from around this area in particular, it moves me. And it frustrates me that these people have lost their lives. And when you think about 110 people in our community, as we go into our holiday season, those folks won't be sitting at a dinner table for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever the holiday may be celebrating. The void that they've left in the families, whether they have families or spouses or children, I don't know. But at the end of the day, there's a void, there's a hole in their lives. And folks are impacted dramatically, more so than the person who lost their lives. So my message to all of you is to say thank you for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to allow me to speak. But ask that you also get engaged outside of the Pittsburgh area in Squirrel Hill and get more engaged outside those areas where we can impact and influence your fellow folks of faith to try to get them to be part of what we're trying to achieve, because that's the way we get it done. So thank you very much for the chance to be here. Thank you for doing what you're doing today. Thank you, Reverend. I don't know where you went. I'm sorry.
Josh. Good afternoon. Thank you, Reverend. I wish all I could stay with you for the rest of the service, but I am also helping lead a phone bank after this, so the work is continuing. I'm Josh Fleetman with Ceasefire PA. If you're not familiar with us, we are the Commonwealth statewide gun violence prevention organization. We organize with communities most impacted by this issue of gun violence. We educate the public and decision makers. We hold lawmakers accountable for their actions or inactions. And we work to build a diverse coalition and maximize the strengths of each member of that coalition to bring their voices to the front of this conversation. Obviously, each one of those t-shirts out there, the lives that they represent, the soul that was extinguished, it's an unspeakable human tragedy. But even more than that, it's a fundamental policy failure. And that's what makes me so frustrated. As Summer Lee mentioned, we are not powerless. We know that every state that has stronger gun laws, they have less gun violence than we do here in Pennsylvania. It's a cynical lie that we cannot do anything to prevent gun violence. We know how to do it. The evidence-based policies are there for us to choose from and to enact here in Pennsylvania. And so much of what we heard from our elected officials here is so critical. Obviously, please go out and make sure you vote. Get everyone you know to go out and vote. Join the gun safety committee here in Sixth Presbyterian Church. I work closely with them. We've been reaching out to communities of faith across the Commonwealth to do exactly that and get people across the state to get their voices heard. Because this is a crisis that is getting worse and worse and worse. Yes, it's a public safety crisis. Yes, it is a public health crisis. It's also a social justice and a racial justice crisis. If you look at the names on those shirts, and as you hear the names today, you probably won't be surprised to hear a lot of the names are from the Black community. You know, Allegheny County's population is 13% Black, and of the homicides we've had this year by guns, 81% of the victims are Black. This crisis is overwhelmingly affecting our Black and brown communities, but also firearm suicide, more of an issue in rural communities among the white community. And so this issue, this epidemic of gun violence, it affects all of us. If you ever hear anybody say, as Marilyn mentioned, oh, that's an issue over there, it's not an issue over here, it affects each and every one of us, and we all have an obligation to do our part, to make our voices heard, to demand change. And so I hope you'll get involved somehow. If you'd like to get involved with Ceasefire PA, we are always here to help you make your voices heard, to get you plugged into advocacy opportunities. Go to our website, ceasefirepa.org. You can work with the Gun Safety Committee here, as I mentioned, who I work very closely with. But really, the message is, we know how to address gun violence. The majority of the population is actually on our side. They support these kinds of common sense safety measures. It's just a matter of making our voices heard, insisting on action, and not stopping until we get it. And it's an honor to be here in this work with all of you. Thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to one day celebrating a day when there's going to be less t-shirts out there. So thank you.
Crystal, if you'd come up and talk to us, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal. I am part of the Mothers of Murdered Sons. They call me a newbie because I just lost my son in April. And he was shot. It went through under his left arm, under his right arm, and went out the left side of him through his heart. A little louder. And my son was a good guy. He was a leader. He had 3 children. 2 boys and a girl. And he loved to go fishing with them, take them swimming, go to the park, play baseball, play football. He was my son. He was my baby. He has an older sister, and she's like his second mother. When I found out about my son, he's been shot 3 times. And when my daughter called me and she told me, Mom, Donnie got shot, I said, where? In his arm, in his leg? She says, I don't know, Mom. So I'm coming to Allegheny General Hospital, and before I can pull up, I see my daughter go over to her father, and she snatches away from him because she can't believe what it is he's telling her. And with my despair of seeing that, I literally got out my car before putting it in park. I just broke. I couldn't walk in to see him. They had to wheel me in because it was so devastating because I wasn't there. That's the bad part, that I wasn't there. And to look at him lay there, I knew he slept. When he slept with his eyes partially open. So I said, he's not dead. He's not dead. I said, his eyes are still open. So when they said you couldn't touch him, but I touched him. Donnie, get up. Donnie, get up. And he didn't. So I asked him, can you please just shut his eyes? That there, it just killed me because he was my baby, and there was nothing else more I could do. But I knew that I had to pull it together because I have 3 grandchildren. And he has a nephew from my daughter. So his daughter, which was 2 at the time, she's 3 now, she would go to my daughter's house and she would say, where my dad? Where my daddy? And not only did it affect her, it affected my daughter to hear her say, where's my daddy? So I told her, I said, Nick, well, maybe take some time, let her stay at home, let her mother explain to her what's going on. So she did. She told her daddy's in heaven. So when she would see his picture, because I lost my mother in November of last year. So when she would see his picture, she said, there go daddy. I said, yeah, that's daddy. Now he has a younger son. I don't think it affected him as much. But just to see them and knowing they won't see their father and knowing that I won't see him, it hurts. And when he was younger, he would always ask for a water gun or a dart gun. I said, you can't have it. I don't like guns. I don't like guns. So no, you can't have a water gun. You can't have a dart gun. So one day he went to the store with someone and they bought him a gun. He was so upset because I cracked the gun. I said it could be plastic and it could shoot water, but you could not have a gun. So with the gun violence, I'm scared. I'm scared. I used to drive home and I'm thinking the very people that shot my son is looking for me. I'm thinking if I'm driving, they're going to see me going home and follow me to my house and shoot me. So I stayed home. And my daughter said, Mom, that's part of depression. I said, Dominique, that's scared. It's scared to me. But my son, though he's gone now from gun violence, I appreciate everything that everyone does for this cause. But my son had a beautiful smile. He had a beautiful smile. Everybody loved him. It was a pour of so many people that I didn't know he affected. When someone says, Donnie cut my mom's grass, and she didn't even ask him to, he just seen that the grass was growing. So he just cut it for her. That's the kind of son I had. So I hope that me sharing my story will reach some other people, because there is a support group called Moms of Murdered Sons. It's real good. It worked for me. Thank you.
Adam Cloud, Alan Richard Parker, Amari Mitchell, Amari Lay, Anthony Lofton, Ashley L. Roberts.
Avante Donovan Booker, Charon Guyton, Christina Spacuzza, Cornell P. Lee, Jr., Dayton Vickers, Davery Thomas, who was one,
Devontae White, Donald Hammond, Daryl Lee Lipford, Edwin R. Green, Glenn Tyrone Davenport III, Ibrahim Diallo.
Isaiah Dennis Anderson, Jaden Brown, Jason Chavez, Javel Smith, James Jeffries, John Larnell Taylor, Jr.,
Johnny Lee Higgins, Jordan Lee Puskar, Joshua Hamilton, Kane Hines, Keith Glasser, Marquise Campbell.
Matthew Steffi Ross, Maurice Cole, Micah Stoner, Michael E. Flaherty, Michael Gunter, Paris Glover,
Rachel Dowden, Shane Evans Strader, Teron Williams, Tywand Hill, Travis George Sainer, Tyree Young.
Willis Brooks, Davon Eggleston, Sean Brookins, John R. Angel, Elon Carrington, Shaquan Cox,
Darian Davis, Robert Dietrich, Stefan Drayton, William Earl Dykes, Tayrod Eugene Ford, Prentice Hutchinson.
Alexander Kowalik, Isaiah Massey, Marvin DeWitt Matthews, Jr., Joseph Mitchell, Leonard Morris Graham, Dwayne Peter,
Mauricio Randolph, Dominique Rucker, Jeremy Monroe Stevens, Charles Gert Stipatich, Malik Thomas, Keith Wicks.
Robert Devon Williams, Kyle Wilson, Dennis P. Winger, Isaiah Pellet, Timothy Coates, Brian Fisher,
Lindell Irish Knight, Damian Jackson, Lejapanis Roberts, Dante Benjamin Jones, Warnell Boyd, Sade Louise Brown.
Darnell Campbell, Carrington Keys, Rayvon Perkins, Demetrius T. Peary, Marcus Watts. We will remember them.
I will now read the Litany of Remembrance. Please respond where it says people. At the rising of the sun and its going down, we will remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of the winter, we will remember them. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of the spring, we will remember them. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of the summer, we will remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of the autumn, we will remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us. We will remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember them. When we have joy and we crave to share, we will remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we will remember them. When we have achievements based on theirs, we will remember them. As long as we live, for now, they are a part of us. We will remember them.
The Litany of Commitment. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the calling to speak is often the vocation of agony, but we must speak. We speak for the voiceless of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, Uvalde, Sandy Hook, and all the other wounded cities and towns throughout this nation, for all the beloved communities torn by the ravages of gun violence. In the words of Dr. King, we are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Now is the time to rid our streets of illegal firearms, to put a stop to the straw purchasing of firearms. With homage to Dr. King, we say, let us begin. Let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter struggle for a new world. Listen to our voices.
I do want to draw your attention. Our young people have put together the mural as part of the commemoration today. Literally within hours of us erecting the display outside, two of Pam Howe's grandchildren, Sadie DeLucia of Joe and Sarah DeLucia, were in lockdown at Kappa because that was the same day that there was a shooting downtown. And the matter-of-factness of our kids who don't know anything different. Sadie said, well, I don't think that the shooter would have gotten to the 7th floor where I am, Mom, so I think everything would have been fine. Is not a world in which I raised my children, and it is not a world in which I grew up. Receive the blessing. May God bless us with discomfort, at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live from deep within our hearts. May God bless us with anger, at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of God's creation, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless us with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, violence, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. And may God bless us with just enough foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in the world so that we can do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all of our children and all our neighbors who are poor. Amen.